Hello everyone! I'm very proud and honored to have special guest, animal trainer Esther Rosenthal here on channel Kiko Pup to tell us about how to get started training rats. Now this video is not only beneficial for those of you who are interested in training your pet rat, but for any beginner trainers and professional trainers interested in training any sort of species of animal. This video is very valuable. Her skills are impeccable. That is why I have her on this channel, because she's not only an extremely skilled trainer, but she's great at explaining what she's doing in a way that everybody can understand. After you've watched the video, don't forget to check out the description for links to free tutorials on training your rat using positive reinforcement. Also, Esther has a Patreon account and you can buy some of her rat's paintings on Etsy, so you have to check that out.
Hi everyone, my name is Esther and today I'm going to be teaching you about training with pet rats. Domestic rats are very social and curious animals, and they need lots of mental and physical enrichment in order to live their best lives. There are many ways you can meet these needs, but one of the most interactive and fun ways is trick training. Now there are a few things you want to consider before jumping into training, and the first one is where you will train. Rats are prey animals, so it's important that they feel super comfortable in any area you plan to train in. I personally use my free-range area for training time, which for my rats is a playpen. However, you can use any area that your rats have explored thoroughly and feel confident in. If you would like to train in a brand new area, you will need to give your rats some time to adjust to the new area, and I suggest doing a few days of just letting them explore this new place before you start trying to train. On top of figuring out a good place to train, you will also want to decide what treats you will be using. Training treats should follow a few loose guidelines, with the main three being that the treat should be small enough to eat in a few seconds, that the treat should be healthy enough to give in largest quantities, and finally that the treat shouldn't be too filling. I would recommend avoiding pet store treats, as most are extremely sugary and filling and should not be given in the quantities needed for training. Personally, I tend to use plain cereals like Cheerios, puff rice snacks like Gerber Puffs, and finally I also like to use baby food and yogurt. You'll notice that half these treats are liquidy, which is important because rats tend to find liquid treats more motivating than solid ones. I like to give my rats liquid treats when first starting out training, because rats can't run off with liquid treats, which helps to start build focus during training time. Moving on from treats, the next thing I want to cover is how old your rats need to be to train. And the answer to this is that rats can really learn at any age. By the time baby rats are ready to go to their new homes, they will be more than old enough to start training. Similarly, even if you get older rats, they will pick up training pretty quickly, although they may be less into the more active tricks such as agility, especially if they are on the pudgier side. So long as your rats are physically and mentally able to do a trick, then they can learn it at any age. Next up, I want to talk about training methods. These are really the meat and potatoes of training, since they are the way you'll convey to your rats what you are looking for. Now there are several main training methods, but I will be talking about what I consider to be the main three, with those being luring, targeting, and shaping. I'm going to start off talking about luring, as I find it to be one of the easier training methods. So what is luring? Well, luring is when you guide your animal into doing a certain action by using an item they want, such as a toy or a treat. In the case of rats, you will pretty much always be using a treat as a lure, and before you jump into using luring to train any tricks, it's a good idea to train the lure itself. Now many people do skip this step, because it feels like rats should naturally know to follow any food around if they want it. And while this works for some rats, others will get super frustrated when you move the treat away from them and perceive it as you teasing them. So to avoid this frustration, I recommend that everyone train the lure as its own behavior first. To start training the lure, offer your rat a liquid treat off your fingers. You can also use solid treats broken into super small bits, however I find liquid treats work better with my rats. Once your rat starts to lick the treat, start to slowly move your hand forwards, making sure the rat is keeping up and still licking up the treat. Repeat this 3 to 5 times, then start to hold the treat out of reach for a step or two before stopping and rewarding. Again, repeat this a few times, then add another step or two before you reward. Continue to gradually increase the amount of steps your rat is following the treat lure before being rewarded until they can follow the lure 10 steps consistently. At this point, you want to proof the lure by using it to lure your rat over things, under things, and in multiple directions. Once your rat can consistently follow the lure 10 plus steps in any direction, then you can move on to using the lure to train tricks. Moving on from luring, the second training method I want to discuss is targeting. Targeting is very similar to luring, only instead of your rat or other animal directly following something they want, you instead teach them to go to or follow another object such as a stick or your hand. There are a few big benefits of using targeting over luring, and one of them is that it allows your rats to work away from you. The other main one is that it removes food or the desired object from the rat's direct sight, making it easier for them to focus on the action they're doing itself. Now, there are several different methods of targeting, with each one having its own purpose when training. For rats, I typically use nose targeting, paw targeting, and stationary targeting the most, so those are what I'll be showing you how to train here. For your target item, you can use anything from an unsharpened pencil, to your hand, to a piece of paper, or really any rat-safe item. Okay, so to start off, I want to talk about how you can train your rat to target with their nose. To start training a rat to target with their nose, start by rubbing a treat on your target, then reward your rat when they sniff it curiously. Repeat this 3 to 5 times, then try to move the target a few steps away and see if your rat will follow it. If they go to the target and nose it, then reward them. If they don't, repeat the prior step a few more times before trying again. Slowly build how many steps your rat has to follow the target before they can nose touch it, and once they can follow it at least 10 steps in any direction, you can then start to use nose targeting to train other tricks. Now moving on to the next targeting method, this time we're going to talk about how you can train a rat to paw a target. To start teaching a rat to paw a target, you first want to start by luring your rat into standing on their hind paws. Lure them up and reward them 3 to 5 times. After this, lure your rat up with one hand and use your other hand to stick your target item directly under one of your rat's paws. Slowly raise the item until it touches their paw, then immediately reward your rat. Repeat this 3 to 5 times, then offer the target out to your rat. If they place their paw on it, reward them, and if not, repeat the prior step a few more times before trying again. Once your rat can place one of their paws on the target, you can now expand upon this behavior by teaching them to do the same with their other paw, or you can start to build distance in the same way you did with nose targeting. You can also use the paw targeting method to teach things such as paw or wave. Now moving on to stationary targeting, this version of targeting teaches your rat to go to a certain spot away from you. This behavior is super helpful if you want to train tricks at a distance because it teaches your rat that moving away from you is rewarding. To train stationary targeting, get your target and place it next to your rat. If they go to investigate it, reward them, and if not, you can place a treat on the target a few times to teach them to go to it. Reward your rat 3 to 5 times for going to the target, then start to move it around. Initially, you will want to keep the target close to your rats, but as they get the idea, you can start to move the target further away. Once your rat can walk several steps away from you to go to the target, you can then start to use it for training other tricks. So that's it for targeting, but the final method of training I want to talk about today is shaping. Shaping is the process in which you break a trick down into small, manageable chunks, then gradually work up to the end behavior. This method is essential for any trick, as there is no way to convey a complex behavior to a rat all at once, so you will need to break it down in order for your rat to learn it. Now, regardless of the training method you use, shaping will always be part of your training. No matter what you are training or how you are training it, you will always have to build to new behaviors over time. Now, that being said, in this section I want to focus on a subset of shaping that stands on its own, and that subset is called free shaping. Now, free shaping is when you train an animal a trick by rewarding them for small approximations of the behavior you want to see as the end goal. But instead of leading your rat into these approximations, you instead wait for them to try new behaviors on their own, then reward those behaviors selectively to build up to your final trick. I think free shaping is easiest to understand through an example, and the one we will be using in this video is free shaping a rat to go through a hoop. Now, there are many ways to train a rat to go through a hoop, and you can use the prior talked about methods such as luring or targeting them through it to train it. But the way you train it using free shaping alone is to place the hoop in front of your rat, then when they show interest in it, reward them. Build up their interest by consistently rewarding them for showing interest in the hoop, then after a few repetitions, start to be more selective about what you reward. So for example, if you were rewarding the rat for walking to the hoop before, now you might only reward the rat if they walk up to the hoop's entrance, then you might work to rewarding the rat when they stick their head in the entrance, then you might only reward them when they stick half their body through the entrance, and finally you might only reward them when they go through the hoop entirely. As your rat starts to get the idea, you'll want to continue to refine what behaviors you'll reward so that you slowly shape your rat's behavior towards the end goal. This process can be slow at first, however the big benefit of free shaping is that it teaches your rats confidence and teaches them to think and figure things out on their own, which in turn creates rats that are quicker to pick things up and quicker to figure out future tricks. Free shaping does tend to be one of the more difficult methods, in my opinion, to train at first. However, if you practice it enough, it does get easier, and it's essential for training tricks like basketball or fetch, where you just have no way to lure the rat into the behavior that you want them to do. Now, one thing I didn't mention so far with free shaping is that there's a super helpful tool that you can use, and that is known as a clicker. Now, clicker training, also known as marker training, is when you train an animal to associate a certain sound with a reward, and it helps speed up training by making your communication with your animals more efficient and clear. Your rat will learn that when they hear a click, they have done something good, and that they will now be rewarded. And because they know that whatever got clicked is something you liked, They will now know to repeat that specific behavior instead of any other behavior they were doing. As far as what to use as a clicker, you can use anything that makes a consistent noise every time you press it. Technically, you can also use your voice, however we tend to be slower to speak than we are at pressing a button, plus it's common for us to modulate our tone, so a clicker is often more helpful when starting out. I do teach my rats a vocal yes to mark behaviors when both my hands are full, but typically I stick to a mechanical clicker because I find it's the most clear. As a little bit of an aside, you don't have to use a commercial clicker for your rats, you can use anything that makes a consistent noise. Personally, my clicker is a popped baby food lid because I tend to use a lot of baby food for my rats, so I pretty much always have a surplus of these lids lying around, and they work perfectly as a clicker for my rats. Regardless of what marker you use, make sure you stay consistent with it in order for it to be the most effective. Now I'd like to move on to talking about trick cues and which ones work best for rats. Cues are the signals you use to ask your animal to do a certain behavior, and they can take many forms. A cue can be a word, body language such as the hand motion, touch, it can be prop-based, smell-based, and so forth. For my rats, I typically use body language-based cues, which due to rats' small size tend to be hand cues. Rats tend to have some difficulty learning verbal cues, so the only verbal cue I train my rats is to come when called. Otherwise, we stick to either hand cues or prop cues, with the prop cue being cued by a hand motion to direct the attention of the rat to the prop, which they then know how to manipulate in a certain way. I would recommend sticking to mainly hand cues and prop cues for any tricks that you train with your rats, and if you do plan to introduce a verbal cue, it's a good idea to teach a hand cue first. Now before we wrap up this video, I'd like to talk some about one final thing, and that thing is generalization. Generalization is when you teach your animal to take a specific task and apply it to multiple situations. This can include applying a behavior to various props, various locations, being able to perform it with various distractions, and so forth. Humans tend to be pretty good at generalization, however the same doesn't apply to most animals, and rats are no exception. Rats tend to be quite good at specifics, but will be slow to generalize when starting out. The more experience your rat gets with generalization, the quicker they'll be to generalize, however you will need to work up to this over time. So for example, if you wanted your rat to perform a trick at a friend's house, you can't just train it in one place and then expect them to transfer the behavior right away. Instead, you would first need to train the trick in an environment your rat feels confident in, then you need to work it in a slightly new environment, then you need to work it in an environment that's a little bit more challenging with more distractions, like let's say another room in your house, then you'd continue to slowly increase the environmental distractions bit by bit before working up to your rat performing at your friend's house. All that is to say, just because a rat has a trick down in one specific context does not mean they'll be able to perform it in any situation. So if you do want your rat to perform the trick in different situations, you will need to work on this separately after they have learned the trick. Okay, so that's about it for this training video. Training rats is super fun, and it's such a great way to meet their needs for both mental and physical activities. And if anyone watching this has rats or other small pets, I highly encourage you to try training with them. I hope you found this video helpful, and a big thanks to KikoPup for letting me talk about rats on their amazing channel. Bye!
I hope you enjoyed that video as much as I did. If you'd like to find out more about rat training using positive reinforcement, check out the description below for Esther Minnick Rosenthal's social media accounts, including her YouTube channel, which has a multitude of amazing information on how to get started and train your rat like a professional. See you later.